Guess what our name is? So we're Griffin Aerotech, and by our trademark tagline, we're an arcade software and hardware company. And my name is Phil, and I'm one of the founders. And next to me, I also have two of the other founders. And I'm Phil.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Brad.
And thanks for coming today. This is going to be hopefully informative, maybe entertaining too. So what are we talking about? This is the presentation. It's called Arcade First Game Development. And what you see in the background there is one of the bosses from an arcade game that we're working on. You also see on this screen another boss that we're working on and what we're going to talk about today. So real short agenda. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about who each of us are and what we do. Then we're going to give you a little bit of arcade history. Really brief, only maybe 2 slides, so it won't be that painful. Then we're going to talk about arcade first and what we mean when we say arcade first. And then we're going to talk about something a little bit more technical. We're going to go into the name of our hardware and then how all of our system is set up, and then our hopes for the future. And before we begin, maybe, I don't know, I guess it might be polite to take a question if anybody has anything up front, if we blew it. Well, anyway, we'll just keep going. So back to this screen. My name's Phil, like I said, and the role that I have on the team is producer. And so what that means is I kind of have my hand in everything. And so from the hardware, from the software, from marketing to sales, I do a little bit of everything. And I think my role more or less is just, oh, nobody else is doing it, I'll do it. And I think on teams or software development teams, there's probably everybody's cross-trained on a lot of different things, but since we're small and we're still self-funded, we have this role where, hey, we need, for example, we need the hotel booked. We do the hotel, or we need the deck put together, so we all help put together the deck, and then Chris, right next to us, not only does he do all the art, but he is also helping put the arcade cabinet in the car.
Yeah.
So Chris Cruz.
Yep. So yeah, my name is Chris Cruz, and I'm the art director for Griffin Aerotech, which essentially means that anything on the creative side sort of flows through me. And that's everything from the pixel art in Skycurser, which we'll be bringing an arcade cabinet up here shortly after our presentation for you guys to check it out. Down to designing the cabinet artwork that goes on to the actual arcade cabinets that we manufacture, down to making sure the website looks good. So I try to handle everything on the creative side, but then also I'm dipping into a little bit of everything as well, as Phil said, with it just being a team of 3 trying to essentially start a new company that does hardware and software. There's lots of different roles to fill, so I jump in wherever I can help.
Yeah, and so I'm Brad. And just to add a little color to what Phil said, Phil does everything Chris and Brad doesn't want to do. So, so my role on the team is technical director. So all the code that we've written so far related to Skycurser, and all the code related to the infrastructure that's in place to support Skycurser and its ability to do downloadable content over the internet. That's what I work on.
So there's all 3 of us, Phil, Chris, Brad. And we mentioned this game that we're working on called Skycurser, and we didn't give you any background on it, but those are where the monsters are from. And Skycurser is the first title from Griffin Aerotech, and that's what's on that arcade cabinet downstairs. And as you can see in the pictures behind us, it's kind of looks like a game from the 90s, right? But it's brand new, made fresh today. Every dot on the screen hand placed or hand created by this person and then placed on the screen by this one. And so, it's definitely go check it out. But yeah, Skycurser, we've been working on it for 2.5 years. And on this next screen, we've had some really cool success so far. That's a picture of the cabinet, and we have it, it's all over the world right now. In arcades, though. Yeah. So as you can see through that list, go ahead, Chris.
So yeah, one of the big things with an arcade game, obviously, is you want locations. It's really all about your locations. Think about every arcade machine that you get out there at a public arcade is a marketing machine for you, right? You sell the deal. You get it's a business-to-business transaction, right? You're not really selling to individual consumers. You're selling to other businesses, which is a different business model, obviously. But the great thing about it, again, is that once you get that arcade cabinet out there, if it's a good game and people are enjoying it, it's doing the marketing for you, right? It's out there, it's big, it's bold, it has a presence. And I think that's one of the reasons why, the arcade is so special, is because, again, it kind of makes a statement when it's out there. So, we're proud of the locations we have. And again, the game isn't even done. We're still working through it, and we've already been able to sell quite a few locations all over the globe, because we're going to touch on this a little bit more later, but the demand is out there right now for new arcade games, and there really isn't very many people making new arcade games.
Right, and Chris said locations. I would say a little bit more specifically, distribution. So our goal is to get as many Griffin Aerotech / Airframe / Skycurser cabinets out there as possible, and get these arcade owners to see how good the content is inside the game. Phil mentioned our game is downstairs. Right now it's downstairs in the atrium in a candy cab. It doesn't look like this. The candy cab we're going to try to bring up here and put in the hallway, so you guys should be able to see that. But yeah, very specifically, I would say distribution. We've got some of the locations listed here, but we probably actually have about 15 plus more locations than what's listed on the slide here.
So anyway, very fun so far. So, young company, but luckily this demand for video games, or specifically arcade games, still exists. And these numbers right here, I'm curious, hopefully this won't just be rhetorical, but if anybody knows what these numbers suggest, I think that would be a cool trivia question.
Yeah, so just think about arcade history. What do we think those numbers on the screen right now represent?
The $sign is a hint.
Go ahead.
Oh my gosh.
Nailed it.
He's killing it, man. Also, who's up on the screen with him? The champion of the arcade.
Michael Jackson actually toured with an arcade. Like, he actually had a plane that was filled with his favorite arcade games, and that went on tour with him, which is pretty epic.
So these are, just for space sake, we put 8 of them up on there. But, for example, Pac-Man, adjusted for inflation, a $7.6 billion game. And this is units sold, Pac-Man arcade units sold. And so just if you think about all these games on this list, that industry was massive.
Yeah.
And the whole, the fervor around it has still not died. There are people that are still ultra passionate about the arcade.
Yep. Yep. And that's really, those numbers are, Avatar, right? Huge movie. Star Wars, this is up there with the biggest types of media ever, is, arcade games, in terms of the amount of money that they were making in the heyday. And of course, we've obviously experienced a very significant down, but crash in the late 80s, and then again in the late 90s. But we're going to touch on something here in just a bit. But I really think that there's a resurgence happening right now, which is actually our first real reason that we're talking about this arcade-first concept. So there's an arcade resurgence. Just yesterday, we went out just for some drinks and to actually put part of this deck together.
Didn't even look.
And we ran into 2 arcade bars here in Columbus. We're from Columbus, but the arcade bar thing is starting to take off. There are a lot of home collectors who are collecting arcade machines now, and there's a new business model out there for arcades, which is free to play. So you maybe pay an entry fee, $15, $20, and all the games are free to play. But the arcade is starting to build up again, and it's set for another big resurgence. And one of the reasons why we decided to do an arcade-first platform with our game is because there's this energy there, this momentum around the arcade that we think we can really capitalize on.
Yeah, and related to this, we believe arcade builds community, and we've experienced that as we go around as we've been around to different arcades. Man, it's insane the amount of people that are in there having fun. It's a little bit different than the console experience. There's that one-to-one, face-to-face interaction that you can't quite replicate with a console experience. So, like Chris said, it's kind of seeing its way back in sort of a different way. But that is to say, we talked about arcade bars and free play, but there are still arcades out there that do coin op. So, that's not the only model that exists. There are still other models of the arcade.
Yeah, and just real quick on the Resurgence, the idea about the Resurgence isn't necessarily that there's ever going to be like another huge Pac-Man that takes the world.
Right,
storm.
right.
Skycurser, come on, man.
I think it would be awesome, but I don't think we're not here telling you that we're making the next Pac-Man and it's going to be in every pizza parlor. It would be awesome. However, the business model has changed, and there is a definite demand and market for this new business model, which is bring people in for the arcade games, just like people would bring it in for like bowling or pool or any of these other entertainment like destinations where you have to physically go, and make all your money selling the things around the experience.
Like beer, for example, right?
Beer, drinks, food, what have you.
Yeah, and we're talking about arcade first as a target. I think one big thing that we need to point out is that beyond just arcade first, it's more of a marketing strategy. There's more to it than just getting your game in the arcade. Yeah, our goal is distribution, but that's for marketing purposes, so that when we take it to a different platform that might be really saturated, such as smartphone market or home console market, depending on which console you're trying to get on, it's already got its traction in the arcade.
Right. So exactly what Brad was saying, we'll kind of bundle that under reason number 2. So first reason was there's an arcade resurgence happening right now, and we're feeling it. So there's like, hey, do you want to be involved with this underserved market right now? And this underserved market brings us to reason number 2, which is there was no new games. When you go to 16-bit in Columbus or Brucadia in Columbus, it's typically older games, right?
Right.
And there are no new games. And the whole idea of there being like no new content for arcades doesn't seem sustainable.
Right. So the slide we showed just a bit ago was actually our first ever location and place in Chicago. Beautiful arcade called Logan Arcade, and it's a barcade. So he makes the majority of his money off of selling drinks, but he has some of the one of the best collections of games that I've ever seen personally, and I've seen a lot of arcades. And he was so excited to get Skycurser. Again, the game is not finished, and he actually reached out to us and said, when can I purchase the game? I'm starving for new content. No one's making games anymore. No one's making traditional joystick and button type games. If they are making games, it's the big expensive light gun type games. There's a couple companies that are doing that, and those cabinets are $20,000, $10,000, $30,000. And what we're doing obviously is a smaller entry fee for the customer. But it's also kind of a traditional game that throws back to the heyday of arcades. And so I really want to drive this home, because the reason why we're here today is to talk to developers, okay? That's why we're here. We want to help other developers get their game out to the arcade, because there are no new games coming out and there is demand. And that's really the big message we wanted to get out today, is that we've jumped through a lot of the hurdles to get out there, get our game, and get our hardware out into the arcade. We've gone through the process of developing the hardware and all that, which was a lot of work, but hopefully that'll help other developers circumvent that, by working with us to get their game onto the arcade. But I just picked that one example out with Logan Hardware, because this guy, he's flush with cash, right? And he wants to buy new games, and no one's making them. And to me, why wouldn't you want to? There's obviously barriers to entry, right? There's complexities to making an arcade game that aren't there when you make a game for Steam or when you make a game for the PlayStation. But when you develop a game for iOS or PlayStation, you're a drop in a bucket, a huge bucket of content, and it's so hard to get noticed. You think about all the great games that come out that no one pays attention to, because there's hundreds or thousands of games coming out every day. and we're looking at this channel of people who are starved for content, and we're like, there's an opportunity here, right? And it's not as big as the iOS, right? It's
No,
not as
it's
big
not
as
as
PlayStation,
big.
nowhere near, but it doesn't mean that there isn't an opportunity to cater to that audience.
Right, which is the whole arcade-first idea. You're probably familiar with the concept of mobile-first development or web-first development, which is the concept of, hey, when you build your app or you build your game or your piece of software, make sure it can also work across devices, right? Makes sense. Hopefully maybe nods, maybe no nods. But I think even if you haven't heard of that, you probably can still relate to, oh, I built my game for Mac. Oh, no, I want to be able to have it run on a PC or run on a handheld. Oh, I should have built a mobile first, or you had a mobile first design philosophy or design method to making sure that my game or my app was able to work in as many places as possible. And modern software allows you to do that very easily, particularly with game development. If you use Unity, you write it once, and it can run in a bunch of places. Does anybody use Unity in here? So when you make your game for Unity, do you have a target in mind? Are you like, I want to be on Steam, I want to be on PS4, right? If you build your game in Unity and you switch over for a little bit to arcade-first game development, would your game run in the arcade? What would you have to do to make it run in the arcade? Just to give you that extra little bit of those things we talked about. A little bit better marketing. The market is starved for content, so maybe you'll get some sales out of it. And that's like the crux of the argument there is it's not
Arcade only. It's not arcade only. It's
Yes.
just thinking about the arcade as the first, in the 90s, when I really grew up playing, like the most serious with my gaming was, in the era where you'd have the arcade release, like a Street Fighter, for example, and they'd make a ton of money in the arcade, and think about all the marketing that was happening, right? Like you had to go to the arcade
Mortal
to play
Monday.
Street Fighter.
Does anybody remember
Mortal Kombat, Mortal Monday?
Mortal Monday.
And it was a phenomenon, right? And it built a lot of energy around it so that when Street Fighter came on Super Nintendo, for example, you were there day one, right? Because you wanted to play that experience that you could only have in the arcade at home. And we're just trying to bring a little bit of that same concept back because we believe the market can support it now. If we would have done this 10 years ago, the arcade was in a huge recession. And there probably wouldn't have been enough momentum to even support a small company like us.
It would have been hard, technically.
The technology is
Exactly,
further along,
right. But because of things like Unity and Game Maker and the fact that there are small micro PCs which is what we use for our hardware, that are inexpensive, easy to get up and running. There's the opportunity, right? So there's the hardware opportunity, there's the market opportunity. And with the software, it's so easy now to program to where, if your arcade version of your game isn't successful, just do the mobile version, right? Just do the console, do the export in Unity, right? For whatever other platform you want to land on. But I do want to make a point of saying that it's arcade first as a concept, not arcade only, right?
It's an and option, not an or option.
Right,
so.
right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Right.
And Chris was talking about how, just talking to arcade owners that are starving for new content, if you think about their business model, it makes a lot of sense. They have all these old games in there. They have only, these arcade bars. A lot of people obviously have to be over 21 to come in and drink and play. So your target market is people who were in the arcade, 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so at some point, so they get this nostalgia feeling when they come into the arcade. Well, at some point, that nostalgia wears off, right? And so they need the new content in order to continue to bring new people in.
And that's so perfect because the third reason, and we just kind of leave this one up here. This was recently at
Southern Fried Game Room
Game Room Expo, which is in Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And this is not a stock photo. This is an actual new gamer, a fresh gamer, playing our game and having, I don't know how somebody got him to catch that picture, but it's just like, the third reason for doing arcade game development or thinking arcade first is, oh wow, it's so cool. Like watching new people actually play your game in real life and having them have to interact physically with it, and then like people walking around, like see these people, they have to notice it's there. This one just came in on our Facebook group. This was at an event in
Paris Game Week.
at Paris Game Week, and there's an arcade that bought one of our boxes that plays the game, and this is another kid, just a little Parisian, having a fantastic time playing, what only I can imagine is like, oh man, this is a rare thing.
This really stuck with me. Literally, this just happened this week because, I think about all the times I would go to the arcade and I would play a game that like really stuck with me. At the time when I was going, the graphics were so much better in the arcade. The experience was so much better than you could get at home. And I just would go home and think about it, and I'm thinking like, maybe this kid just went home and was like, wow, that game was so crazy, and it's just really exciting. But the thing about the arcade is that it is a physical thing, right? Like, I don't want to sound like I have some kind of ego or something, but
He does. He's an artist.
Well, I would never sell my game for 99 cents, like ever. I'd rather sell 1,000, at our cost than sell 1,000,000 for 99 cents, right? We are getting to such a situation where it's a race to the bottom, right, with development, and that's unfair for us as developers to have to try to sell our game for as inexpensive as possible, to hit that market, to just try and hope we get the next Flappy Bird, right? I don't want to do that. And I'm sure some of you guys are frustrated with that as well. So this arcade opportunity, we're just here today to bring that message of just think about it as an opportunity. Think about it as an option, when you're thinking about developing your game. Because again, I think it's unfair for developers to have to put all this work into their projects and then try to sell it, for the same cost as for fries, like at McDonald's or whatever. And with the arcade, it is a physical thing, and you're selling to businesses, right? And they have money, and they are willing to spend that money if your game can bring in more patrons to their arcades, right? So there's the just selfish part of it of, I'm not going to sell my game for 99 cents. I don't care, right? Like, that's not going to happen. And I think that's another part of this is that, it's a completely different market that you're selling to, and the demands are different. But in my mind, it's friendlier to the developer, right? You're dealing with other companies, other businesses that understand that, you need to make money, right? They don't have those same crazy expectations that a lot of gamers in general have, right? And so it's just a different kind of transaction, and I think that's another reason why the arcade is particularly appealing right now.
Chris, I wouldn't mind having a game as successful as Flappy Bird.
I wouldn't either. Don't get me wrong.
No, but Chris is saying that, but at some point, our goal is probably going to be to take this and port it to some platform, if not multiple platforms. So, that being said, it's just like up front, it seems like it's so much of a better idea to take it the route that we've taken it. And you might be wondering, you might be asking yourself, why should I take an arcade cabinet that's basically the size of a refrigerator around and try to get people to buy it? But like we've already said, it's physical. It forces people to interact, and yeah.
Cool. So we've gotten through like the big three reasons, but we haven't finished what we had on the agenda. The next part is to talk through some more of the technical things. So the audience, presumably developers, you probably have some questions about, well, hopefully you have questions about what actually the stuff is, or the hardware that in the software, how they combine, and what we actually ship to people. So if you were to be
let's hit those three again, though, just to drive it home. Okay. Right. So we talked. There's an arcade Resurgence. Right. We ran into 2 arcade bars here in Columbus and weren't even looking for them. There's no new content. There are maybe 2 companies in America right now that make new arcade games, and they make big, super expensive arcade games.
$30,000 arcade games.
Exactly. So that's the only gig in town, essentially. So you're not going to have a ton of competition, and you're going to have an audience that's starved for content. And number 3, again, is that piece that it's just really cool. Another story kind of just about this idea of the arcade as a marketing machine. We were probably only a few months into the game, and we put some animated GIFs up of the game and showed some pictures of the cabinet, and we got an email from Sony. And they wanted us to sign up for their development program, their indie development program. And this is our first game, right? Like, we had no experience. And we were in a situation where we were like, let's wait. We told them, we're going to wait. We're going to try this arcade thing and really see it out. And that probably seems absurd to a lot of you guys, but they would have not reached out to us. We're proud of the game. I think it's a cool game. They wouldn't have paid attention had we not had this energy around it of it being an arcade game, if that makes sense, right? I'm proud of the game. I think it's awesome, but I also am very aware of the fact that this arcade thing is the reason why we're here today talking to you guys, right? Like, you guys probably will, you'll play Skycurser, maybe you'll think it's great, maybe you think it sucks, but again, this arcade first thing is the reason why we're here today talking to you guys. So I just wanted to recap on those reasons again.
Good call.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, we were only how far along with it at the time they contacted us, so we're still, actually, the game isn't complete yet, so we're still working on it. We've got a lot of things.
Should be done by the end of the year, though.
Yeah. So we got a lot of things we're going to add to it, but it's coming along nicely. So
we've mentioned a lot of branded marketing terms. So like, our name is Griffin Aerotech, which is actually originally was the fictional company inside the Skycurser universe. So
it's like Aperture Science and
Aperture
Portal.
Science. So we just were like, hey, why not? And it'll give us something to talk about. It's Aerotech, but our whole theme so far has been this idea of who are the coolest people in the world? Fighter pilots. So we're stealing a little bit of that.
Developers, man.
Yeah.
Developers are the coolest.
I disagree. Fighter pilots. So we also mentioned this thing. The name of our platform follows that theme, and it's called Airframe. And if there's, I think, maybe one little blurb that sums it up or one little slide that sums it up, is everything on the screen. And so the big vision eventually is to have an airframe, which is the name of our box that runs the game, and it's connected to the cloud. It does all your latest buzzword stuff. But the idea is to be able to have all these boxes all over the world that are all interconnected, all these arcades that are interconnected, and be able to distribute games, new arcade games, via these boxes.
And what we're trying to do is
What we're doing.
What we're already doing is we've got Skycurser in every location that it's in right now. It's Wi-Fi enabled. We can pass updates to it over the internet. It's real easy for an arcade operator to go in, see a new version, hit download update, or we've already done automatic updates if they are just taking a while to update it. And we're working on the API for basically the game center for the arcade. So, all the achievements. So our goal with this is high replay value for all the games that we build, because we want the arcade operators to be successful with the games that they have, and we want them to see the value in any new games that are coming.
So yeah, essentially your achievements, your account would transfer from one airframe game to the next, right? So you're playing Skycurser for 1 minute, and you get some achievements, and you go over to the next game, and because they're all connected to the same server network, it remembers, it knows where you are and it knows who you are. So there's opportunity to do some crazy stuff where you earn and reward.
Cross promotion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that there's an opportunity for questions. So I'm going to get to this next slide, which is just roll plans for the future. I know we're close to almost being at time. I know we started 10 minutes late, so that'll leave us with approximately 10 minutes for questions. But real quick, plans for the future. I think you've probably understood now that we just want to be in as many locations as possible. And that's as soon as we get out of here, that's probably what we're going to go start thinking about, continue thinking about, is how to get into as many arcades. And the reason is just because right now, every arcade is another reason for another development team to start building for the arcade again. So every time we sell one, every time a new city over in Europe or in Japan, we just sent one to Tokyo a couple weeks ago, is just another reason, another potential customer ready to go that already has the hardware.
That wants new games, right?
We'd love to also, I mean, we're here today with our development message, so I don't know if you're familiar with Steve Ballmer's jumping around on the screen, developers situation, but that's kind of what we're doing. And I know we were supposed to stand at some point, but I don't think we're going to stand. So there won't be any jumping around.
So I think I should add something to that. You know, the hardware is in a lot of the locations. The hardware's in all the locations that we're in right now. We're trying to get other games into those locations, but part of our goal is to have. We've got some ideas around how we want to approach it, but we don't necessarily want to approach, at least out of the gate, the Neo Geo style of cabinet. We think there's some sort of awe to a game being able to stand on its own, and so we're not trying to what's the word I'm looking for? We're not trying to basically cut the experience for each game that's in the cab. We want each cab to have its own game in it, so that it's just that game's experience.
Right. Anything to add on that?
No, I was just going to say, Brad just referenced the Neo Geo. Is anybody familiar with Neo Geo? It used to, they were really very successful in the 90s, amazing games, but the way that their cabinet worked was essentially, it was a cartridge-based system where you could swap games in and out. What Brad was just touching on is we could do that right now with the way that the airframe works, but we're kind of trying to do it to where every arcade machine is its own game, right?
Yeah, cannibalize. That's what I was trying. I didn't want to cannibalize. We don't want to cannibalize the experience of one arcade.
We don't want the games to compete with each other in the cabinet, right? Yeah.
Yep. Any questions? Shoot, I saw this man right here. What's up?
Yeah, that's a great question. You have to be able to accept money, essentially, right? So the game has to be programmed in such a way that it accepts credits and doesn't play until it accepts the credits. A lot of our locations are free to play, but a lot of our locations are also coin-based. So just even thinking about making sure that that works exactly the way it's supposed to can be a little bit of a challenge, because if you don't give the player their turn for their money, they're going to be really, really mad. And if you give them plays without money, the operator is going to be really, really mad, right? So even just little nuances like that is one of the things I would say you really have to think of. You have to think about, when you develop a game for PlayStation or Steam, you give the user all the control for the sound and all that. You have to think about it from the perspective of the arcade operator. So what things do they need to be able to control? How much it costs to play a game?
How many lives, if your game does lives?
Right. How hard the game is, for example, based on, how hard they want to tax people for coins, basically. That's another one. The control scheme is definitely one. I think the arcade is so interesting because it has to be fun right away. Right? You can't have a tutorial section, right? Like, you have to put your money in, boom, you're having fun, like, instantly. And so that's the way I want to develop games. Like, I want my game to not be so, overblown that I have to explain everything. It's just, boom, start having fun right away. So that's something we always try to think of. You have to think about the fact that you're going to be in a room that is so saturated with sound and visuals because there's so many other arcade machines running. It has to stand out in some way. And the way we chose to try to do it with Skycurser was just, you'll see it today, every sprite on the screen basically fills up the entire screen. Everything is huge. It's all over the top. The sound effects are over the top. It's like, throw as much stuff as possible out there. But yeah, I would say, it has to be able to earn money. It has to be kind of instantly gratifying, replay value. So, you want it to be able to continue to earn. I'm using really kind of aggressive, like, businessy terms like earning money, but that is the reality of it, right? Like, the thing has to make money or the operators won't be interested in it. And it has to be able to be supportive of the arcade operator rather than the end user, right? Which is kind of a different way of thinking about it. So those are the big ones that come to mind for me.
Let me mention one real quick. So the instantly gratifying, we've put a lot of time into that with Skycurser, the kind of the player feedback loop, what they're doing with the controls, how it feels when they see it on screen, and just kind of the constant feedback loop that they're getting while they're playing. So that's a big part of it. Phil's got some ideas written down here. So
Yeah, we've discussed this before, but we've never like actually sat down and like written them out, but we probably should do that. I think that would be incredibly helpful for any type of development kit. But what you mentioned, I'm going to just repeat them real quick. So controls for sure. Make sure that the person or the whole situation can be handled through typical arcade controls or however the controls exist in your game, for example. They need to be able to withstand any physical abuse of being on location.
Right, yeah, they're going to get beat up.
So the things that also fall out from that are the game needs to run 24/7. So one of our early builds of the game
burn-in.
Couldn't run for more than like 6 hours at a time.
Tiny memory leak that wouldn't, wouldn't have been a big issue for any other platform, right? But the fact that the game literally just sat there and was running 24/7, that's tiny little memory leak over 2 days.
Guys, I'm sorry.
Memory leak.
Yeah. No, but I mean, it just that is interesting though, right? It's something you have to think about that you wouldn't have to think about if you develop for another platform.
Right. So I think those are the big ones. Those are definitely the big ones. Any other questions? What else we got? I know there was some in this quadrant. Yes?
It
could definitely be a touch screen.
I mean, there are touchscreen arcade games out there right now. The thing that, with the way that our platform works, it's more based on traditional type controls. There's a ton of flexibility there, but we, again, because we have this model where we sell the boxes that can run in other cabinets, you know, it's something that our system doesn't account for touchscreen, but it's an option, right? You have to think about the fact that there's going to be thousands of people touching it. It has to be able to withstand all that, you know, 24/7.
So I think it's not a home. The durability of the system isn't just like a normal consumer. It needs to be like a commercial,
really resilient, yeah.
Input device. Let's take one more. I think we just got. Yeah, go ahead. Well, this is all, I mean, very new at the moment, so we're just trying to get as many as possible. So I'm going to tell you it's going to be very cheap. It's not going to cost you, we were not going to nickel and dime you over stuff. There are things that we could help with that I think we deserve to get compensated for. For example, if you needed art design for the cabinet and you didn't have that in-house, then we could help you produce that art. And so it would mostly just be like a time and material situation. But currently, I think it's safe to say we're not taking like a 20% cut right now. We're just like, we want developers on the system.
Yeah, I mean, I stressed this a little bit earlier, but I do want to say it again before we have to go. This thing lives and dies by the quality of the games, right? And so if we can get some other development teams that are talented and excited about this arcade opportunity, we will be successful. Without that, I don't know. Right? Like, I think Skycursor is awesome, but we all have, you know, the amount of time we can put into games, I don't think we can meet the demand that's out there, to be completely honest, on our own. So we really need talented developers that are interested in this arcade opportunity, or else I don't think we'll be successful. I don't think we can make it happen.
Part of our goal is also to be like a network connected. So if you are missing some talent on your team, you need a sound technician, you need a musician, you need some sort of like game visionary or something along those lines.
We can put
our goal is to be networked enough so that we can connect people into that.
Yeah.
So.
Right. I think there was one more. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question was on the same lines.
And we definitely we can offline that conversation too. But you know, essentially, we just want to work as a publisher. So help individuals get the game out there, and then eventually kind of work out some type of thing where we're not going to make a dime until you do. So some type of back end thing was how it would work.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It got ridiculously hardcore there, especially when the arcade was really, really popping, where they had kind of a rule of 3 minutes. It was 3 minutes for every quarter, essentially. And we've kind of tried to adopt a little bit of that. But at the end of the day,
We don't live and die by it. though,
right.
'cause
We just want
it's-
people to have fun, right? Like, so, you know, we right now, you'll play the game. It's probably too hard, to be completely candid with you right now. And we're working on ways to kind of soften it up a little bit. But you do have to be conscious of that. You don't want someone to be able to go in there and literally play through the whole game on one quarter, unless they're just super good at it. Or just really, really experienced gamer. But yeah, it's something you have to think of because, you know, it has to make money for the operator or they're going to lose their interest in continuing to buy games from you.
Anyone else? Go.
Yeah, each one of the games is collecting its data on its gameplay. Right now, we're not pulling that back to home base, but yeah, we can do that. We're trying to smooth a couple other things out, and then we'll anonymize the data when we pull it back. So.
Cool. Hit us up afterwards. Thanks very
Thank you,
much
guys.
for your time.